Hi, hello, it's Leilani from the Bible in 1 Year. Today we are starting with a new book in the Gospels, which is the book of Luke, and we'll be reading from verse 1 to 25 of the first chapter. Now, Luke opens his Gospel in a very gentle and careful tone, not as a sensational storyteller, but as a man who has carefully investigated everything from the beginning. He writes not from hearsay, but from deep conviction. And he wants his readers to know that what they believe is grounded in truth. And so, before Jesus is born, before his mother Mary hears from the angel, Luke takes us to an old priest and his barren wife, Zachariah and Elizabeth. Now, they were righteous before God, not perfect, but they were faithful. They walked in all the commandments of the Lord. And yet, for years, they have carried the silent sorrow of unanswered prayers. And they prayed for a child, and they did not receive. And now they were old. And in that time, barrenness was often seen as a sign of shame or disfavor, even though Luke makes it clear that Elizabeth's childlessness has nothing to do with sin. Now, sometimes suffering just exists, even for the faithful. Now, after centuries of prophetic silence from God, after 400 years without a single word from heaven since Malachi, God speaks. And he does it in the most unexpected way, to a priest doing his duty, offering incense at the temple. There, in the quiet sacredness of the holy place, the angel Gabriel appears to Zechariah. Now, the message is that your prayer has been heard. And David Guzik notes how touching this is, that God heard a prayer, likely prayed many years ago, a prayer perhaps long buried under disappointment. And we don't know if Zechariah was still actively praying for a child at his age, but even if he had stopped, God has not forgotten. Now the angel Gabriel tells him not only will they have a son, but they will call him John, and he will be great in the sight of the Lord, and he will be a forerunner preparing the way for the Lord himself. And it is as if heaven is saying your pain and your waiting and your emptiness, it has a purpose in his plan. But Zechariah responds with doubt. How can this be? He looks at the facts. I am old and my wife is well along in years. He is very logical in this moment, reasonable, and also just human. And yet, faith is not always about reason. Faith is about trusting that God can do the impossible. And Gabriel, in a holy seriousness, says, I am Gabriel, who stands in the presence of God. Almost as if it says, if you knew who you were speaking to, you'd believe differently. Zechariah is made silent, unable to speak, but not as a punishment, but as a sign that God said, what God said would happen. Now, meanwhile, Elizabeth becomes pregnant, and her response is so beautiful. She goes into seclusion and says that the Lord has done this for me, to remove my disgrace. And there's joy, there is humility, and there is no bitterness and no boasting. Just a gentle, grateful heart of a woman who has waited long and has finally seen the faithfulness of God. So what do we learn here today? It is that God is not rushed and he is not silent. Sometimes he saves his biggest breakthroughs for the places we least expect. An old couple, a barren woman, a quiet temple duty, a weary prayer. Today, wherever you find yourself in the waiting, in the hopelessness, I want to tell you that God's delays are not always his denials. He is always working, even in the waiting. Zechariah had to be silent for a time, but soon he would speak again, and when he did, it would be words of prophecy and praise, because when God finally breaks the silence, it is always worth the wait. I want to thank you for listening to me today. Until we read again together next week, be blessed and goodbye.